Thanks for taking time to join us today. I am Kara Pepper-Day, Account Director here in Portland, Oregon, and joined by Jim Thompson, GreatVines co-founder and product evangelist.
Hello, everybody.
Today, Jim will dig into digital content and mobile presentations and how this can be integrated and easy to use. We have a half an hour set aside, including a Q&A session at the end, so we should jump right in. Just a little housekeeping before we pass it over to you, Jim. Everyone is on mute, but please do type questions in the panel on the right side of your screen. As always, if more specific questions arise from this review, please let us know and we can follow up directly with you and your team. Jim, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, so I'm happy to talk to you about digital content and how you can make this an effective strategy for your go-to-market operations and sales team. I thought we'd start out with a pretty appropriate quote from a study done 5 years ago that, our users really do expect their content to be available anywhere, anytime, and on any device. And that's really a driving principle for us in how we utilize content in the GreatVines application. But first, let's look back at where we've come from. I think everybody remembers the days of paper printouts and riding around in your car with sheets of paper that you're distributing during your field visits. One of the main problems with these materials is that they're static, they're out of date pretty quickly. Costs a lot of money to print these materials, as I'm sure you can imagine and remember, and they relatively have a short shelf life. I mean, you're often reprinting materials all the time with the latest information. They're very difficult to share when you want to get them out to multiple people, and it's certainly not very green. And so thankfully today we have a lot of resources at our disposal, from great technology to great ways of delivering and creating and presenting content. Today's devices are high resolution, and so we get the equivalent of a high definition presentation of our content on very modern mobile devices. Our content is accurate and it's up to date. More importantly, we really think of content as being heavily brand driven, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, and connected to all the other digital assets in our organization. Content is also highly collaborative today. So not only are team members able to collaborate around content and on the exact messaging of content, but they can provide a very easy feedback loop to the marketing and brand teams to be able to talk about which content is effective in the field and which is helping accomplish their objectives. Of course, with today's mobile devices, they're often connected to our email, and so a lot of this content is just one tap away from being able to distribute them out to our contacts and our partners. Last and not least, we have the kind of tracking we never had before, which is knowing when people have opened these emails, looked at these presentations, how long have they looked at these presentations, and are they really effective? And so this is a great amount of information that we have, and we're going to talk to you about how to work this into your operation. We really do think about content as being at the heart of the entire go-to-market strategy, from sales enablement, giving reps in the field information without having to schedule office trainings, to having reps reviewing content with their trade influencers and buyers. Again, we talked about collaboration, and so in our world, collaborating with our supplier or distributor partners, or maybe even our agencies. Using content to reinforce brand standards, such as shelf placements, planograms in the off-trade, that sort of thing. And then last but not least, of course, sales training. Digital content has enabled us to accommodate more of a recurring, ongoing training than having to pull your whole team out of the field for a couple of days and sit them down in a seat. So we're able to publish relevant content out to them really quickly. So what are some of the strategies that we want to talk about today? The first is aligning your content to your sales process. And so making sure that your sales and marketing and brand teams are working together, that the content that we're generating doesn't just meet the marketing goals, but it also helps drive efficiency in the sales organization and helps the sales team accomplish their objectives, whether it be videos, PowerPoints, PDFs, and leave-behinds. We want to make sure that the content is grouped properly into the right libraries, which you'll see an example and demo of in a bit, and that the content is really tied to the sales goals and objectives. It's a great way to get alignment between the sales, marketing, and brand teams. Of course, another strategy is make sure you're publishing the latest content, is to try to keep a recurring pace on building new content, refreshing it, making sure that you're reflecting the latest changes in the market and that you're keeping up with all the changes within your brand family. So it's important to keep that content up to date, and of course our tools and others like it make it very easy to publish the latest information and track revisions. Of course, at the center of all this is presenting this content electronically, and I call this out because we do believe that for the strategies you're going to see today, that tablets really are best. Tablets tend to have the best file formats and support the largest resolutions, and we really think of phones as being a way to introduce content to our buyers and our contacts, but would certainly encourage that sales reps and marketing field reps aren't trying to walk a customer or a buyer through an entire presentation on a small format phone. And so the strategy that we introduce here, rather simple one, is just using phones to maybe more introduce the content and then send it electronically by email to those individuals. And then two slightly more advanced topics we're calling out here as sort of pro strategies is monitoring the usage and looking at when the content is being sent out. It's part of that critical feedback loop back to the marketing and brand teams, as well as encouraging the sales team to do votes such as thumbs up, thumbs down on the content. Is this working in the field? Is it not working? And so that way you have a chance to possibly archive that for later use and replace it with more relevant or more useful content. And secondly, and it's really tied to the ability of monitoring the usage and the effectiveness, is to try and migrate away from sending files as attachments. One of the big problems in combating spam is that attachments are one of the first red flags for possible spam. And so whenever somebody's email system encounters incoming attachments, it just flags it to be checked for other reasons. And you certainly don't want to be blacklisted or even whitelisted, which means your emails are going nowhere and you don't even know it. So what we encourage our customers to do is to build email templates in whichever email system you may be using. There's a lot of built-in capabilities in our product, but in whichever email system you're using, building email templates that have links to this content. So I'll be showing you an example of that today. I just want to touch briefly on the structure of our content system and the way that we think of digital content being related to the other parts of your organization. You know, we've talked about brand management. We think it's really important that your content align to not just a list of your brands, but to the very brands that your sales data are tied to. And so, as an example, a feature in GreatVines is when I link a new video or PowerPoint presentation to my Beach Beer brand, I know that the retail account depletions and the shipments and all of the objectives are all tied to that very same record. And that's important from a reporting standpoint, right? So we're tying our content into the resulting volume of sales out in the field. Also, we talked about team collaboration. Part of our product, of course, is Chatter, which is sort of an internal intranet or an internal social media for your employees. And what this allows is your entire team to be sourcing or crowdsourcing, if you will, content that might be relevant, whether it's a photo of a perfect back bar, a photo of a display, or even taking a sales document from their mobile device, being able to push that back into the repository so that a marketing or brand administrator or manager can approve it and make that part of the standard library. And so that way you're feeding information in from the outside using your internal social network. Last and not least, of course, it's important to define roles and permissions so that your users can be segmented out by the brands that are important to them. And so, again, this is a key feature of GreatVines, being able to add in access to certain individuals to all of your libraries, and you'll see that here in a second. And so the last comment I'll make, we think it's critical that the tool that you're using to present your content has to be simple. It has to be fully offline enabled. What does that mean? I need the ability to sync all of this content, including my videos, onto my device, so that way when I'm in a basement bar or at the back of a large warehouse store, I still have the ability to present all this content and record information about the engagement without relying on my cellular or Wi-Fi connection. I think we all know that that's pretty important today, as much as ubiquitous connectivity across the country is a goal. We're just not there. Last and not least, we think it's critical that this tool be able to interoperate with the other applications and networks around content, such as Acrobat, SharePoint, PowerPoint, Box, and Dropbox. You'll see an example of those today, and of course Google Drive. So here's a list of the things that we're going to cover briefly during our demo. We're going to look at this from a marketing perspective, managing content on the backside, defining those content libraries we talked about, uploading a file into the system, assigning all that content out to our brands, and again, the very same brands that are connected to all of our sales and volume data, making sure that the content is relevant to our key objectives so that we know that our team has this content in front of them when they're accomplishing their goals, revising and featuring their content and measuring the usefulness. And then from a sales perspective, how do I find the files that may be relevant? How do I subscribe to them so that way I can be notified automatically and take the burden off of the marketing team to distribute this information? We can do that automatically. How do we present that content and how do we send it out to our contacts? And last and not least, from the administrator side, how can I tell who's opened it and who's been sending content so that I can share that knowledge among my team? So with that, I'm going to switch over to my other screen here. So here we are in the GreatVines desktop application. I'm of course in a web browser signed in, and we're looking at our GreatVines content application. And I'm starting off with our brands because I know I keep coming back to this point, but it's critical that the content be tied into these brands that are at the heart of your sales strategy. And so today we're going to be talking about Venice Beach Brewing. I'm a beer guy, so this is an easy topic for me. And we're bringing on a new category of products, our Venice Beach IPA. You see it here defined, and I might have multiple SKUs against that product. Pretty straightforward. So one of the things that we want to make sure of is that as we look at our content libraries, that we have the proper place to put all this information. So here's an example of our content libraries tab within GreatVines. We can see some of the content that's featured across all of our libraries. And now we have a Venice Beach Brewing library specific to that brand here, as well as some other brands. We also have set aside trade marketing specific content, as well as some internal content, which could be your training materials. So we're going to click in to browse the Venice Beach Brewing library. And I can see here that I've got about 7 pieces of content that we've uploaded into the system. I can see which ones have been featured, which means that I've pushed this out automatically so that every rep has it on their device offline, whether they've subscribed to it or not, or even whether they have any objectives relevant to this content. Our system does some intelligent connectivity between objectives and content by brand. And so whether or not they have objectives for that individual brand, we want to push these 2 pieces of content so they're available at all times. Then down at the bottom, we talked about security and permissions. You see here that I can track different people's roles in these individual libraries. And so I've got a test user here. I'm going to add them into this library and define that their capabilities are that either they're an author and can contribute to this repository or whether they're just purely a viewer. So we'll save that as a viewer. One of the other things I'm going to do today is pull up this Beer Education 101. This is something that I want my reps to start sharing with folks. It's really more of a narrative, but for some of my accounts that are maybe less beer savvy and we're trying to get a new tap handle or a display, we want this piece of content available, so I'm going to click the feature button. Also, if this were an old piece of content, I could even come up under edit and I can archive it. I can move it to other libraries. And last but not least, I can upload a new version. And so now I will get complete version tracking of when different versions have been created and replaced. Now, as a user, if I'm looking at this, I can actually subscribe to this piece of content. So when that new version was updated, the next morning I've got an email saying there's been a new version. All I have to do is make sure my mobile device has performed a sync, and then I've got that new version of the content. So switching over to the sales rep view, we talked briefly about Chatter. One of the great things here is as our team is discussing objectives and accounts and posting images, for example, here is an image of an account that Kara has taken and posted into our feed. So this piece of content can automatically be added into our repository. I can go into file sharing and make sure that this is visible to all my users. Again, upload a new version. So we have real-time connection between the Chatter files and content. All of these different documents and presentations and videos can be sorted into those libraries. I can even get into the files directly from here, and this is the same as with my mobile app. And so I can come down and subscribe, again, to this beer education piece. Now I'm following that. I'm interested in the drink recipes, so I'm going to follow that. So that's how we subscribe, and as an end user, whether the content has been featured or not, I'm pulling that down into my mobile device. I can look at the documents that I'm subscribed to, as well as administrators can look at this and look at content by library or just by title. Then the last thing before we jump to the mobile application, I'm going to pull up my list of objectives around the Venice Beach brand so I can monitor what's going on out in the field. So currently we've got 6 objectives here, and I can see that this content will be available to my reps when they're working these various objectives to get the Venice Beach IPA into distribution, or get cases on display, or get a new tap handle. We'll come back to the reports in later in the presentation, but for now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the iPad. So here we are. It's the beginning of my day. I'm out in the field. I've got GreatVines open. I'm looking at my list of objectives in the upper left. I know that one of the things I'm doing today is focusing on Venice Beach. So for example, here's a store I'm calling on, the Meyer store. I can see that this is an objective related to Venice Beach Brewing for the Venice Beach IPA. We're trying to get some cases and an end cap. So we're going to be going in to meet with the buyer there. We're going to pitch some display ideas. With this little orange icon, I can actually click right into this account, and I can see that this account's owned by Chris, the sales manager. I can see who my primary contact is there, Adam. And so as part of my account visit and maybe even my survey, one of the things I can do is come down to my objectives in the lower right, and now I have content with just one tap away. Because of that intelligent association between our content and our brands, since the system knows I'm trying to sell in the Venice Beach brand, I've got all of this content available to me. And so I can pull up that history of IPA document if I wanted to send that. Or, for example, perhaps our IPA was featured as one of the top 25 beers of 2015, and here I've got a nice little write-up that I can show my buyer and talk about how it's a really well-received product in the media. And of course, I'm one click from being able to send these out directly to our buyers by email, right? I've got my share button in the upper right that I can tap. I can just tap email. And of course, this is the simple version. It's just going to take that piece of content, it's going to attach it automatically to the email, and off it goes. Okay, we're going to delete that. Come back in here. In addition to being able to look at that content in context of our sales activities, we of course also have the content tab. And so with the content tab, I can click on Venice Beach Brewing, and there I can scroll through and see a preview of each of these pieces of content that we've looked at, right? One of the things that our customers have asked us for is an easier way to present video. And so with our latest version, Goonies, you see here on the left, we've got a little GreatVines video here, and with one tap, I just click the view icon, and the video starts playing. Okay, so I'm going to close that. So all of our content's available through this tab. We can present it to our end buyers, but also you notice that we've got, for example, with this PDF, I have an open in button, and that open in button allows me to move this content around between Dropbox. I can open it in Adobe Acrobat. I can even read it in Kindle if I'd like to. And so we have direct connectivity to all the other apps you have on your device that support that kind of content. Same with the videos. You can have video apps installed to do narration and that sort of thing. The last thing that I wanted to show is back on the account, when I pull up that objective, perhaps as an organization, you have a separate asset management system such as Box. We have the ability to link, for example, here at the bottom, you see Open in Box. And so by tapping that button, it'll actually open the Box application and display those same pieces of content which have been cached for offline use. and I've got all of that content right here in Box. So again, minimizing the number of clicks, trying to make sure that we're fully integrated into whatever your content management system is. We certainly would like it to be the one built into GreatVines, but we have the ability to link with a lot of other social networks and other systems. So now I'm going to go back briefly into the browser and show you one or two things more, and then we'll open it up for questions. So now as an administrator, I have the ability to come in here and look at a report of all of the content that has been delivered. So here's an example of a report of email that's gone out. I can see whether or not an email template was used, the date it was sent, whether or not the email was opened, and how many times it was opened. So that's really useful as a report. You can schedule this report to be run and sent to all of your end users once a week, once a day. And so as they're kind of planning their week and they're visiting with these contacts again in the future, they have a sense of whether they actually ever opened that content that they sent or not. Then the last thing that I want to show, which I forgot to show earlier, is coming back into our libraries. Let's pull up one piece of content real quick. Browse back into the Venice Beach Brewing. Let's look at this top 25 beers. We talked about one of those pro tips, which is delivering the content through the browser as a delivery instead of sending it as an attachment. You see, with 2 clicks as an administrator, I'm able to generate an online delivery of this piece of content. It's taking that content, converting it essentially into a web presentation, and then I get the ability to embed this URL. There you go. I can click preview. I can look at what it looks like, make sure that everything looks the way that I want it to. Okay, it renders just fine. I can flip through the pages, and then I can take this URL and I can move this into my email template so that all my contacts have to do is click on that, and then now we know that they've looked at that file. And that's it. Kara?
We do. We have a few questions, some good ones too.
Okay.
The first one is, featuring a piece of content pushes it to all iPads and then it will be available offline, correct?
That is correct. So coming back into this library, we showed this briefly. All of the featured content with the star will be consumed by every end user's mobile device. It will be synced for offline usage the very next time that their device syncs. And the same, so that's from the marketing and brand team pushing content out to the users, and then from the end user's perspective, all they have to do is subscribe to content, and then they get the same thing, right? So just by clicking the plus sign, they'll automatically get that synced to their device, whether it's tied to a brand or not.
Okay, we have a couple more.
Okay.
How does this work on a phone, and what type of phone?
So that is a great question. So we have both the mobile app, GreatVines Mobile for iPad, and for our customers that are running on phones, also have the option of using the Salesforce One mobile application. And that application has the same ability to present the content and even cache some of this information offline. So let's see if I switch over to Salesforce One. I can show you this. Of course, this is not what it would look like on the phone, but it works exactly the same way. You see here down the left, I have what's called a Files tab, and this Files tab is going to pull out the content that was in my individual repositories. You see here that some of this content I've already flagged to be stored offline. I can look at those same pieces of content that I saw in the browser, and this is fully synced with everything that I've done in the desktop environment as well.
Very good. And what about what type of phone?
Thank you. So that application is available for Windows Mobile, iOS, so iPhones, Androids, as well as Blackberries. So pretty much all the different device operating systems that are available today.
Okay. Do we need to worry about running out of file space with content?
That's a great question. So with GreatVines, of course, our application runs on the Salesforce platform, and so with that, every account gets a certain amount of file storage, but that's separate from your record storage, so it's not intermingled with your data. The file storage tends to be somewhere around 10 to 50 times your record storage. So there is a theoretical limit. It tends to be very high. I think last time I checked, one customer had a 100 gigabyte limit, which is, as it sounds, it's a lot of storage space. But in the event that you're loading a lot of videos or content and want to go beyond that limit, then you can add storage incrementally at a very low cost.
Okay. That is all of the questions that we had today. Jimmy did a great job today. Thank you all for joining us. We did record the presentation today, and we will post it to our website. We will include the link in a follow-up email back to you, and you can sign in and review this and other past webinars. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everybody.